Before this video begins, I was hacked recently and lost control of my channel. There's been a ton of damage to my channel and my algorithm as the hacker streamed a crypto scam. Taking 2 seconds to click a few buttons would support me a lot, and thank you for your help while I try to rebuild. The commander card that we are playing today is Taking Over Vintage. I've received so many messages across social media that Vintage is seeing a ton of coveted jewel in the format. While this 6-mana card might sound dumb to be a staple in the format, Vintage has a load of degenerate artifact ramp that makes a 6-mana artifact easy to cast on turn 1. After getting the jewel on the table and drawing 3 cards, we have many ways to either bounce or copy it so that we can draw more cards and get more mana. Then, after drawing a load of our deck, we have a few ways to win. Our main win condition will be Time Vault and Manifold Key. This is an infinite turns combo as the Time Vault doesn't untap itself, but if you use the Manifold Key to cheese that and untap it and activate it after every turn, you'll take the rest of the turns of the game. There are also many other ways to win the game like Urza Saga tokens and Karn the Great Creator, and there's some other niche things in the deck that we may discover. Throughout this video, we get multiple turn 1 kills. The only problem with this deck though, is that it costs over $90,000. Starting round 1 game 1, we're on the draw, but we have a very good hand because if we can draw a degenerate mana source, then we have a turn 1 kill. The opponent plays a Mox, a Sensei's Divining Top, and an Urza Saga and uses that to spin the top. And we draw Paradoxical Outcome off the top of the deck. Now as Paradoxical Outcome lets you bounce as many things as you'd like, I decide to play the Mana Crypt, the Grim Monolith, and then copy the Grim Monolith with the Phyrexian Metamorph, and then we can play our Island and Paradoxical Outcome to draw 3 cards. This was a somewhat risky play as I'm forcing the opponent to have the Force of Will, but they don't have it, and we draw the Black Lotus, which means we can now combo with Coveted Jewel, essentially winning on turn 1, as we know the opponent doesn't have Force of Will. As I need more information on the opponent's deck, I decide to not make any changes for sideboarding. Being in the draw for game 2, we have a Soul Ring and a Trinisphere, which is something that I just can't mulligan, so we're going to keep this and see what they have. The opponent starts off with a Black Lotus and a Mox, casting a Karn, which we have to Force of Will, and it resolves. They also follow up with an Urza Saga and ship back the turn. As the opponent has only 2 cards in hand, I decide to play the Soul Ring and the Moonsilver Key with the plan of sacking it on their end step, as with only 2 cards in hand and a draw step, it doesn't feel like I can impact their hand enough with the Trinisphere on the board now, and it probably hurts me more than them. They play a Tolarian Academy and pass back the turn, so I Moonsilver Key and get Coveted Jewel. We top deck Mox Opal, so I'm kind of forced to cast the Trinisphere because we want to be able to have 6 mana next turn and I need Metalcraft. Now the opponent makes a construct on my end step and they untap. With the Urza Saga, they make a construct in response to the trigger and they find a Soul Ring and then they bash in with the construct. We draw another Coveted Jewel, so we're kind of forced to cast the first one. Let's see if it will resolve. The Coveted Jewel resolves and we draw a Tinker. I decide to tinker away the Trinisphere because the Trinisphere is hurting myself, but then they have a Pact of Negation, which is terrible for us because now they can steal the Coveted Jewel. Coveted Jewel has extra text where if an opponent attacks you and it's not blocked, then they steal the jewel and draw 3 cards and untap it, so this is about to be a nightmare. And then what's even funnier is I find out that this is actually the mirror when they Paradoxical Outcome and play a Phyrexian Metamorph to copy my Coveted Jewel. Wow. For boarding this time, I take out a basic island and a Moonsilver Key for a Pact of Negation and a Force of Negation. We're on the play for game 3, and we're hoping for a miracle. Our opening hand isn't good enough, we need at least some sort of combo turn 1, so we have to mulligan. Our next hand though is really good, we have a ton of mana, and we're just going to bottom the Force of Will because if this Coveted Jewel resolves, then we win the game. We didn't come here to not go for it, so let's try and combo. Luckily, the Coveted Jewel resolves. Round 2 doesn't have the best start in the world when we have to mulligan down to 5 and we get to keep a Force of Will hand, but with not much else going on. This is really rough, we're just leaning really heavily on Urza Saga here to help us win the game, and the opponent has a degenerate start. But what makes things worse is that we instantly find out that we're playing the mirror. Okay, I'm just joking. They pass back the turn, we play an Urza's Saga and ship it back. A load of nothing starts to happen as me and my opponent have clearly burnt out of good spells, so when we use a construct token and find a paradoxical outcome, I decide that it's time to go for it. The opponent has the Force of Will, but we have the Pact of Negation, so I think it's time to combo. Start of the next game in the mirror, we have a fast hand, and if we can find a mana source off the top, then we can resolve this coveted jewel as we currently have 5 mana for the first turn. The opponent plays an Ancient Tomb, a Mox Sapphire, and a Mana Vault and just ships back the turn, and we manage to find a Phyrexian Metamorph. So I decide that a sensible decision here is to set up so that I can cast Pact of Negation just in case they have a coveted jewel and I need to stop them from comboing. Don't forget, Mishra's Workshop can only cast artifact spells, so I have to use both Phyrexian Metamorphs, one copying the Mox Sapphire, one copying the Mana Vault, so that I now have 5 untapped mana to cast the Pact of Negation and also pay for it on my upkeep if I'm that desperate. The opponent does in fact cast a coveted jewel. We have to use Pact of Negation, but they have the Force of Will backup, meaning that they can now combo themselves. I ended up scooping when they paradoxical outcomed this board, as it was clear that even if they whiffed, they almost definitely have a counterspell to stop my coveted jewel. Going into game 3, we keep a really nice hand on the play. We can turn 1 Time Walk, turn 2 coveted jewel after our Time Walk, and force them to have the Force of Will. I forgot to mention that this was a mulligan to 6 and my opponent mulligan to 5, which is what made it even stronger, so he put the spare Ancient Tomb on the bottom of the deck. Our Time Walk resolves, and we cast our Moxes and go to our second turn. Well, we found a Mox Opal, so there's nothing left to do but cast his coveted jewel and pray that they don't have a Force of Will. And they have the Force of Will. Now they only have 3 cards left in hand, with a natural draw step, so we're still very favored in this spot as we have a load of card draw in our deck. We will definitely have way more mana than the opponent, so let's just see what they can do. Load of nothing begins to happen, we both get 1 draw step, until a nightmare scenario happens. We draw Mishra's Workshop, and the opponent instantly goes deep into the tank, meaning that I know that I'm about to be into trouble. The opponent just displayed Vintage here. Even though they mulligan to 5, had the Force of Will, they still, even though the opponent can mulligan to 5, they can still have the Force of Will and then rip the combo off the top of the deck, or just find the mana source that they need off the top of the deck to win the game. It happens because the power level in Vintage is so high that it's very easy to draw out of a mulligan like this. Going into the third round, we're on the play and praying that we're not playing a mirror again because we have a very good opening hand. We cast the Mana Crypt, the Grim Monolith, and the Mox Opal, and then use that to cast the paradoxical outcome, but sadly the opponent has the Force of Will, so we just gotta play our Urza's Saga and say go. The opponent also plays a Saga and a Mox, and we draw a land, so we're just gonna play our second Urza's Saga and go for a big construct kill. The opponent doesn't really do anything on their turn, so we decide to make a construct on their end step. As we draw Ancestral Recall for turn, we can search up a blue source with the Urza's Saga, then use the Ancestral Recall and try and combo. We find a Sensei's Divining Top, which is really useful as that finds a coveted jewel off the top of the deck. We then use the coveted jewel, we then use the Sensei's Divining Top to draw the coveted jewel, and I actually make a huge mistake by using Mox Opal to activate the Sensei's Divining Top because I was being greedy with my mana. If I used the Grim Monolith to activate Sensei's Divining Top, then I would have been able to draw this Tinker that I see on top of my deck. Now it might not seem like too much of a big deal, but the opponent fetches Black Lotus with this Urza's Saga, then uses Tinker, gets Bolas' Citadel, and kills me. What a huge mistake, a big oversight by me, just being greedy with this Grim Monolith. Look at the board, I have millions of mana, there was no need for me to not activate the Sensei's Divining Top with the Grim Monolith. These small mistakes really do add up in Vintage, and it happens sometimes. Going into boarding, I bring in a Force of Negation over a Moon Silver Key just because I want some extra interaction to deal with all of their premium spells. Going into game 2, we have to mulligan to 5 and keep a risky Urza's Saga hand alongside a Force of Will and Force of Negation so that we can win with the constructs. I'm not gonna lie, this game is just really confusing because the opponent doesn't really do anything. They Gitaxian Probe me, then on my upkeep they Mystical Tutor for a Tinker, and then for the rest of the game I hold up Force of Will because they know about it from the Gitaxian Probe, and they just don't do anything. We use Urza's Constructs to beat them down, we also have Paradoxical Outcome. They force back the Paradoxical Outcome, but then we force back, find a Force of Will on top with Sensei's Divining Top, use that to counter the Tinker, and then they just lose to the Constructs. For game 3, we have to mulligan to 6 and we keep a really nice opening hand. All we need is one degenerate mana source off the top of the deck, and we can cast Coveted Jewel. The opponent plays an Urza Saga and passes back the turn, and we find a Grim Monolith. I have no clue what the opponent was doing, but they made me wait 4 minutes to resolve these Grim Monoliths, but is what it is. Let's try and resolve this Coveted Jewel. Wait a second, I just drew all those cards and I don't have a way to cast Coveted Jewel. I ran out of mana. Look how many lands I drew, this is insane. So now we have to pass back the turn with a few counterspells up and just hope that it works. Now I don't know what was happening with the opponent, but they genuinely played so slow. To sum up what they did, they played a Time Walk, used Urza Saga to get another Mock so that they could cast Lavinia, and then I used Force of Will on Lavinia, and it worked, and I got to untap and combo kill. In round 4 I lost to a Kataki World's Wake, which was really disruptive and also a deck that played multiple Wastelands, which just beat up on me, so yeah, we lost 2 quick games to that, a deck clearly designed to beat this artifact deck. In round 5 we managed to get a turn 2 Coveted Jewel kill with Pact of Negation backup, which shows the true power level of this deck. Even though that we went 3-2 in this video, I believe that this is the best deck in Vintage right now because of the sheer power level and how many turn 1 kills you can get with this deck. Now I'll open the chest for you gambling degenerates and check out this video because YouTube thinks you'll like it.